Okay, welcome back folks. This video is a continuation of my last video. We're shooting a 243 Remington 700. It used to belong to my grandfather. He had a lot of success hunting with this 85 grain Sierra GameKing. Now the powder he used was MR 3100, which isn't available anymore. So in the last video we tried some Stayball 6.5 and some IMR 4451. So this is what we shot with IMR 4451, and if we put our thumb over this guy over here, it looks pretty good, but two little problems. First of all, the velocity was only 2870 with the highest load that I fired. My grandfather's success on deer was at about 3,000 feet per second, and you can actually take it on up to 3,100 and beyond in 243, or I should be able to with my 22-inch barrel in this Remington 700. So we need to take a pretty big jump in charge weight and then see what accuracy looks like there. The second problem we had was with really poor standard deviation numbers. It was mainly on this first one. That had a standard deviation of 44.6. It got better in the next one. It came down to 15, and then it jumped back up to 23.6 with our last load. So I'm hoping that bringing our charge weights up higher and filling up more of that case with powder will result in better standard deviations. Because listen, standard deviations of 15, 20, maybe 25, I wouldn't really probably worry too much. If that's as good as we get today, I'll probably still be okay with that. But when I start getting numbers up in the 30s and even the 40s, like something's wrong. The powder's not igniting consistently or something, right? It's in that realm of internal ballistics that I do not understand. Something's not happening consistently. So even if this load is going to be a pretty short range deer load for the most part, and the big SD doesn't really matter the way it would matter on a long range load, it still just makes me nervous. So we're going to jump straight into shooting today. Our 30 pieces of brass that we fire formed in the last video, this is Winchester brass. This Winchester brass has been tumbled, it's been annealed, it's been full length resized. I sized it in my Lee resizing die with the expander removed. And with this Lee die, it was everything I could do to get a little bit of shoulder bump. So this die is really screwed down tight onto the shell holder. Nothing wrong with that, just thought I'd mention it. So next I used a 21st century expanding mandrel to open up the neck. So I used a 241 expander. So that's 2 thousandths under bullet diameter. And when I pulled the expander out of this Lee resizing die, I measured it and it was about a 0.5 thousandths larger than that. So 241 expander here is about 241 and a half. So I'm going to have a little bit more neck tension today than I had in the last video. I don't know if that'll matter. Just thought I'd mention it. And our seating die is still set from the last video, so as the press sits right here, it's ready to seat bullets. So after being full length resized and then expanded, I trimmed them with the Lee setup, and it took about 5 or 6 thousandths off of all of the cases, and they all needed trimmed. So should have nice uniform length today, square cuts, and then nicely deburred and chamfered case mouth. On the primer side of things, I am switching to the Federal GM 210M primer. We shot the Winchester WLR in the last video. I don't necessarily think it was a culprit with our high SDs, but still, I shoot more Federal primers and I've got a little bit more confidence in them. So that's what I'm switching to. I'm changing a lot of things here simultaneously, which is not exactly good practice for reloading, but I kind of just want this to be over with. This isn't my gun. It's just going back into the safe. I would just like to have some ammo loaded for it so it's ready to go hunting if somebody in the family wants to hunt with it. So with the brass fully prepped today, the plan is just to jump back and forth from the bench to the range, take a couple shots, and see how far we can get with these 30 shots. Because I really only want to go through the brass prep one more time on this brass and then load it up and move on. So that's the goal for today. I took our velocities from the last video and put them on a chart, and the velocity trend line is pointing right at 42.0 grain. So I want to load 5 shots. I've got them marked here in Sharpie on the side of the case. So like that one's the 41.6, which is the lowest charge, and then we're just moving up in 0.2 increments to 42.4. So let's go shoot these 5, and we can check for pressure signs and see if the velocity is about where we expect. So I've got my brass, I've got my bullets, Charge Master Light ready to go. So one thing I forgot to mention is that this bullet is not in my Sierra manual for 243. Some of you guys in the comments let me know that your manual shows a max of 43.3 grains. In my manual, it's page 335 to 336 is jumping from 70 and 75 grain up to 90 and 95. So hopefully they fixed this in later editions of the manual. This was the first printing, so I'm sure it's on the app. I let my app subscription expire. I need to renew it. So even after these loads, we've still got a good ways up we could go if we feel like we need to. So it's the same 2.635 overall length that we shot, or that we set up in the last video. So these are also seating like extremely smooth. So if this is a little bit more neck tension than we were shooting last time, I'm not feeling it here during the seating operation. Okay, first 5 shots. Let's get to the range. Okay, so the target's at 100 yards. Since accuracy doesn't really matter on these first couple shots, we're primarily worried about the velocity. I'm going to take this opportunity to go ahead and zero this scope. It was shooting high and to the right in the last video, so let's try and bring it dead on. So I'm shooting low to high, so the first one here is 41.6. Well, it got pretty close on that zero. So the first velocity was 29.30. Bolt lift felt nice and light. Brass looks good. Let's keep shooting. Okay, so our last 2 shots, each of them were 29.66 feet per second. So I think what I want to do is just go in and load 5 more to just continue this series on up. So that'll take us up to 43.4, which is a 10th over max. That sounds good. Let me go load those 5. Okay, loaded up and ready. 5 more shots. Like so far so good as far as bolt lift. None of that's been heavy. Primers look great. So last one, 43.4. Okay, let's get back to the bench. We'll put this all on that chart and come up with some charge weights to test. Okay, here's what it looks like with our shots on a chart. And with the questionable SDs, I don't really trust this chart to give us a whole lot of info. So like these first 10 shots, I got out of it. We're, testing for pressure signs and getting an idea of about where our velocities are. If our SDs don't calm down, then this chart doesn't really matter. So I want to just pick a couple kind of random loads and shoot them. So 42.3 is right down here between 2 shots that were both 2,966 feet per second. So let's load up 5 shots and see what happens down there. And then let's also load up 42.7, which should be right at 3,000 feet per second. I think from the 10 shot group we just fired with these last 10 shots, we're not going to have to worry about accuracy. We could pick any load and probably shoot a 3/4 inch group or a 1/2 inch group with it. So let's try these 2. Let's see what the SD numbers look like. If they're good and the velocity looks good, this might be it. So I'll get them weighed out, 42.3, and then we'll get back out there. Okay, let's start with the 42.3 grain load and see what happens. So shot marker says that was a 0.93 inch group. Velocity was 29.95, right where we were expecting. That was the 3,000 feet per second load. And standard deviation was 22.3. Extreme spread 59. I was hoping it would be a little bit better than that, but it's not awful. All right, moving on to 42.7. So pretty similar performance with both of these. This last one was 0.94 inches, average velocity of 3,024, and standard deviation 27.8. So I didn't think it through a little bit ago. That first group, that was supposed to be 29.66. So velocity was a little bit higher than we expected on that one. And same thing on this one. This last group was supposed to be the 3,000 feet per second load, and we came out with 30.24. So with standard deviations of 22 and 27, I think it just is what it is. All right, let me think. Let's get back to the bench. So I think I've got a plan together. I'm going to switch powders again. We're going to load up these last 10 shots with Hodgdon H4831 SC. I looked at the Hodgdon data, looked at the Sierra data, and I'm going to load 45.0 and 45.5. Just kind of a last ditch effort here because Stayball 6.5 had terrible SDs. IMR 4451 didn't have good ones, but this slower, bulkier powder will have a fuller case, and maybe that'll help. It's starting to rain out there, so I might just have to use shot marker on these. I need to buy a little like umbrella that hooks to my tripod for my target camera. I'm sure they make those. So that's it. That's the plan. I'll get these loaded up and we'll get back out there. Okay, it seems to have stopped raining. We'll start with 45.0. I expect our velocity is probably already up over 3,100 feet per second with this powder. Let's find out. Okay, that doesn't really make sense. 28.43. Much lower than I expected. Brass looks fine. That kind of reminds me of the groups we were shooting with Stayball 6.5 in the last video. So that's 1.04 inches, average velocity 28.64, standard deviation 25.9. Man, that velocity surprises me. But plenty of room to move up, and these were not compressed loads. Still a little bit of empty case that we could fill with powder. Okay, 45.5. Okay, so that's our best group of the day, 0.82 inches, velocity 29.44, and standard deviation 18.7. So hey, the rain held off. That's a good thing. I probably should put these caps back on the scope. All right, let's get packed up, get back to the bench. So I don't have anything to show you on the brass, so I won't waste your time. We just had a whole lot of mediocre results today. So these are our two IMR 4451 groups that matter. And let's see, our SDs were 22.3 and 27.8. That's a whole lot better than 40 something from the last video. But it's still not good. And man, I want to keep working on it. I want to put a 24 power scope on this gun. I want to buy another box of bullets because I'm going to be out. And I want to try some of the other, like there's a million other perfect powders for this application. But that's not what this was about, right? It was bare minimum to get a usable hunting load, and I think I've got that. I'd love to get some other brass and try it, but I just need to move on. Just need to move on. We're good. But don't be surprised if a video pops up down the road where we pull this guy back out and try some other powders. Because it's clearly a good shooting gun. Yeah, that's a 4 to 12 power hunting scope. So I was shooting it on 12 power. The crosshairs are gigantic. It's hard to aim. My eyes suck. You might have noticed sometimes I had my glasses on. Sometimes I had them off. I was kind of trying to experiment and get the best sight picture I could. So I know that had an effect. So I'd love to see what I could do with with a different scope on the gun. So maybe one of these days. But for the time being, I think that's it. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time.